Hey, JD, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, it's exciting to meet you. I feel like I've been seeing your name quite a bit circulating on social media and,
Yeah,
recently getting to see your article in the Star Telegram. So you've got some exciting things happening.
I do. Yeah, it's been quite the experience so far. Something that I never anticipated happening, but here we are. And I've seen your name too. So it's yeah, see you all over the place now. So it's
Yeah, it's
honor to be
always
here.
nice to make the in-person introduction, and
Sure.
that's been one of the reasons why I started the podcast was to be able to actually get to sit down and have some of these in-depth discussions about
Yeah.
different things in the industry and
Right.
people that are in the oil and gas space, and
Sure.
everyone has such a different experience, and yours has been very unique.
Yeah.
And congratulations on your book, and
Yeah.
I
Thank you.
really enjoyed reading that last week.
Yeah, I was nervous to get your feedback. I know you read a lot, so yeah, I'm more worried about the flow of the book than the actual content. So hearing you say that you enjoyed it, yeah, it meant a lot. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is your first book, and it's also
Yeah,
very, personal.
very.
So
Yeah,
that takes a lot of courage to, to get out there and,
sure.
and to put yourself out there. But yeah, I really did enjoy it.
Yeah,
And I, the takeaway for me, because I don't have that actual like firsthand experience
yeah,
of the juvenile system, is
sure.
what you had written mostly about, and just kind of
Yeah,
being a youth
right.
and going through those different experiences. But I could really relate and understand as far as like having those problems and not being able to find solutions,
Right.
and you walked the reader through the experiences that you'd gone through, and I
Yeah,
feel like anybody could take something away from that,
sure.
but I really could see a lot of young men
Yeah,
being able to digest that
yeah,
very easily the way that you wrote it,
right.
and like that they could relate like their own personal experiences and be inspired by it.
Sure. Well, and that was kind of the thought process behind it, right? I could have made it a very thick, long book, but guys that age, they're not going to want to read something that's going to, take them forever to read, right? They want something pretty quick that they can get through. And I always want to leave a message in there, something that they can take home with them, right? And if they get something from it, great. I just wanted them to understand that, that's not the end of the road. There's a whole life waiting for them outside of that. And it's really up to them to make that mind shift and follow through with it. So,
Absolutely, and I really appreciate the way you frame that in that perspective,
yeah,
because you were mentioning before when we spoke before about how you took a lot of those life experiences and
yeah,
developed them into skills that you've cultivated in your career, and so even
yeah,
though those were hard years to look back on
sure.
and set you back in a way,
Right,
with just multiple incarcerations and not ever having that opportunity to have a clean break
right.
starting in life, but you were able to take some of those experiences and turn them into real value.
Sure. Yeah, there's things that you learn as a teenager going through high school, with the proms and the different classes that you pick up in high school, your friend group, the social settings that are different from somebody going through a system, right? Because when you're in the system, it's a survival mode that you have to be in all the time. You have to keep your guard up. You have to understand your surroundings, know the people that you're dealing with, and know everybody in the room. And so I think when you're an adult and you move forward and you take those skills that you learn in there, then you can use them to your benefit. You can understand how people's emotion and or how somebody's going to react to certain environments, and you're able to pick up on certain things, as in the business world that I found that have been extremely beneficial for me. And I wouldn't have learned that in high school. It would have taken me years to pick that up. And so, do I regret what I've did? Yes, but I learned a lot of valuable life skills that I could have only picked up in there, and it probably would have taken me years to acquire those skills, if I didn't have that experience.
Absolutely. And I can understand that, especially that thought process. Because looking back on in
Sure.
for me, like in high school, it was like I didn't know who I was or what I was going to do,
Yeah.
and didn't have anything mapped out. Where like some people, it seems so simple. It's like you go
Right.
to high school, then you go to college, then you start your career,
Yeah.
and you have a track.
Right.
But when you get lost in a system like that, or you get kind of thrust into a system because you, like you had mentioned in your book, you were reacting to a circumstance. Your
Right.
parents had gotten divorced, you'd moved with your dad to
Yeah.
West Texas, your mom was in Wyoming, and so you were kind of responding to circumstances beyond your control that you
Right.
didn't know how to process, and
Yeah.
got into trouble hanging out with older kids that
Right.
got you in more trouble. And you can see how that system, like, that became your track,
Right.
and that could have continued to be your track if you didn't break that cycle for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, in the book, I write about that. There was one momentum or monumental shift in, my thought process. And that was kind of towards the end of the book, right? Up until that point, I thought this was my life. This is how everything was supposed to play out. I was going to be in and out of prison. Like this was it for me. And I knew deep down that that's not what I wanted, but I didn't have the tools to move beyond that. And then it just happened one night, just sitting there reading a letter that I'd received from a friend back home. And it just kind of hit me that I needed to make a change. I wanted something different for my life. And that was a pivotal moment for me, was to accept that and know that what I've been doing isn't working. And so from that point on, I made a change, and I knew deep down that there were greater things in life stored, that I had stored for me in the future. And I needed that push. And it doesn't happen with a lot of kids. Most of the time they get stuck in that thought process that this is it for them, and they continue that, I guess they continue that journey, going in and out, staying in trouble, hanging out with the wrong people. And it took me a while to overcome a lot of that, even when I did get out. But I knew deep down that, I needed something different, and I was meant for something bigger. So yeah, it was one moment. So one time.
That's amazing. Well, and that personal will allowed you to make that change. But
Sure.
Looking at the patterns in the book, and the different system, the different types of systems.
Right.
You have boot camp, you have detention centers, you have all of these, different, basically just different levels of incarceration for juveniles.
Yeah.
But nowhere did I feel like there was any kind of leadership in the systems that were actually helping kids change or feel hopeful. And I mean, not to mention the abuse and the neglect, and I mean, the sheer acts of suppression.
Right.
From feeling like you matter and feeling like there's hope.
Right.
And so it's like you cling to some of those, those moments. Like I know that, like, for one Christmas you mentioned that, like, they gave out an orange and some peanuts.
Yeah.
And it was like, it seemed so like it could have been like seemingly insulting, but it was really like such a warm gesture in a cold environment that you hung on to that. But I can only imagine not having personal will, not having hope, not having faith in yourself, not having leadership. Like, how would a young man feel like it could be different?
Absolutely. There's so many different avenues in the system. Texas, for one, their turnover rate with the staff is extremely high. Most people can't handle it. The ones that do, there's kind of a control method there, and so the kids that are in those systems, they're there for a reason. They keep them there. There's no outside help, and there's nothing really put in place for them to learn and grow. It's more of like, let's keep them here, and then they do their time and they're gone. So there's not a lot of resources for them. You bring up the oranges and the peanuts, for Christmas. That was my Christmas present one year, orange, and I never in a million years would have thought that I'd hang on to that or remember that. But that was a very powerful moment for all of us, I think, because we put our socks out as a joke. as Christmas stockings, right? And we just hung them off the end of the bunk bed, and next thing you know, we wake up in the morning, there's a couple peanuts and oranges in there, and it was like, wow, okay, cool, this is something different. That's so it was kind of a funny thing, but you look back on it now and think, if anybody's got kids, like if that was their Christmas present, that would be heartbreaking. It'd be heartbreaking for me to think about, my kids being in that situation. So,
Right.
Yeah, it was quite the experience.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you really traveled through it.
Yeah.
And so it's really it's frustrating because when we look at systems, we look at institutions, like like obviously, like there are certain environments where there's going to need to be, like, restraint, or obviously, like, you've convicted felon, and
Sure.
you've caused harm to other people, like, you're not necessarily going to be put somewhere where people are going to build you up.
Right.
But especially in the juvenile systems, it seems like it's very much just like you're saying, like, not a lot of resources, turnover in the staff. It's like there's not really anyone that's really taking their time to counsel you or help you reform. Do you think that because obviously this was many years ago for you, do you keep up with the juvenile system at all now? Do you know if there's been changes or any kind of growth?
There has been processes that are new that have been put in place, that have been implemented from the government, right? From the Attorney General's office, that, they kind of tried to crack down and change the environment to some degree. I would say there's a little bit more for the kids now than there was when I was in, of course, in the 90s. But that took a long time for them to change. And we're talking 2004, 2005. And what really, I think, broke the straw was in West Texas. They had the Pyote State School, West Texas State School in Pyote. Most people pass it every day, especially if you're driving from Odessa to Pecos. It's the old military compound over there that they turned into a juvenile detention center, and you see the fences and all that up, just right outside of Pyote. There was, some of the head executives that were over that facility that all got busted for sexual assault. They were, abusing a lot of the boys that were in there. And it took that had happened over a certain amount of years that they were getting away with this, and they finally got caught. And that kind of turned the eye to the state system and said, okay, we got to take a better look at this, because this is, blowing up nationwide. And those changes took effect then. So you could only imagine how it was taken advantage of prior to that, and how many people were abused and went through that system and didn't have the help or, the know-how to get that word out and have that kind of attention brought into them. So I haven't kept up with it too much. I have done a little bit of research, especially when writing this book, to kind of look at what's transpired over those years. And it's still pretty much the same, minus a few loopholes that they've managed to fix, but it's still pretty incredible as to how it's still happening. I see reports all the time where a kid's been assaulted in some manner, and the parents are trying to raise awareness because they had no idea that this was going on. And I think that was just in the paper not too long ago. So it's still happening. It's still taking place. The turnover rate's higher now than I think it ever has been, because people can't mentally adjust to that. They can't handle it. And a lot of the kids that are in there, they come from very broken homes, very poor environments, and they don't have a lot of education. So the reaction from those type of kids are pretty violent to some degree, and the staff can't handle that. They can't mentally handle it, so they check out pretty quick. I think the turnover rate was highest within the first 90 days. And then they're fortunate to keep anybody past that. And so with that turnover rate constantly happening, you got so many people coming in with, authoritative, role, to where these kids are constantly having to adapt to new changes all the time. It puts a lot of pressure on everybody, kids, staff, the facilities themselves. So yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of changes that have taken place since I was there.
Well, with writing your book, and I know it's still early, but
Sure.
have you had any response from like the Texas state systems? Like, have you, I mean, especially like getting the article written in the Star Telegram and getting a little bit more exposure for it.
Sure. I've had several people reach out that were interested in the book. They were wanting to acquire it and start using it for them, to kind of help. And that, I think more of that is the along the probation lines, the juvenile detention centers prior to the kids going in the state. They want to help them understand what they're looking at and what the obstacles are, and that it's not too late to change. So I'm working right now with a gentleman out of Granbury who's, working with some of the juvenile detention centers, a lady that runs a ministry for a lot of the prison systems, and especially with the juveniles in the Texas Department of Juvenile Justice now, I think is what it's called. So it is gaining traction. That's really where I wanted it to go in the first place, was, to try to help, the younger kids that are stuck in that same cycle and let them know that they can break it, and I think it's starting to get there. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing, and because that's not something that you see a whole lot, like pulling back the curtain from the inside perspective from someone that has surpassed that lifestyle, and so like when I was reading it, like I said, I could see a lot of different takeaways, from someone that like maybe is currently in that position or has been in that position, and it gives them just a little bit of feeling like they're heard and seen, that their experiences matter. Like obviously, if you're detained in some type of system, like you've done wrong, but that could be, you're 15, 16 years old. This doesn't necessarily reflect who you're going to become.
Right.
But it can, especially if, you just become that number. And then maybe you get into a fight and you get more time, or you have different experiences that shape a new reality for you, and then you get out, you don't have family, you don't have hope. Right. So how are you supposed to really dig within yourself and feel like you truly matter after you're also very institutionalized, because you're used to that structure, and so you don't even know how to act once you get that freedom. And so that freedom, being thrust out into the world, or whatever the the protocol may be, like whether you're in a halfway house, you're on probation, you're checking in with someone, that still doesn't mean that you're on a track that will be successful or fruitful for you.
100%. I mean, it's really up to that person. They have to make that decision on their own. And that has to come deep within. Now, I don't think that there's a whole lot of resources available to them when they do get out. I think the state needs to do a better job at providing, independent type lifestyles for the kids that do get out and don't really have somewhere to go. Even the ones that do, they need to understand responsibilities. They need to understand how life works outside of that. And you can't just take them and put them back in their household and expect them to understand that. They're not going to have those tools. The tools that you acquire inside that facility is not the same as what you would get moving out of high school, when, you have high school counselors that are, career oriented, like say, here's your plan to get out of high school, either go to college, military, or go to start the workforce. They give you those resources. The state doesn't really give you that. It's really up to yourself to make those plans. And you have a probation officer, a parole officer that is supposed to try to help with that. But all they do is they give you, timelines. Okay, you got to have a job by this. You got to be enrolled here and do this. But they're dealing with hundreds of kids, and they can't keep an eye on you all the time. And you don't have the amount of counselors available that are free, or can be there to help without costing an arm and a leg to kind of help guide you. So most of the time those kids get out and they go right back into the same environment as to where they left, and what created that toxic system for them to go into the system in the first place.
Right. So it's so broken in so many ways, because likely or possibly they came from a broken home and they enter into a broken system. Right. Where it further creates more chaos and confusion and limitation. And then you get out and it's a broken world.
Right.
And then you don't have that structure, and you don't have the guidance, and then you have the emotional repercussions, mental repercussions from what you've gone through. And I mean, it can be difficult just just being a, average, person in the world trying to be successful. And then you have all of that baggage.
Right.
And if you don't unpack it or you don't use it, you don't metabolize it to create something else, then you're likely going to end up back where you started. And then it becomes that same like broken system all over again. Like, this is where I belong. I have no value. Nobody cares about me. Or, there's lots of different views that you can have, and feeling like you have no worth or you have nothing to contribute, or why bother?
That was the biggest thing for me, the biggest hurdle, right? Was when I got out and entered the workforce and started to, adapt to the environment that I was in. I felt ashamed or judged, and I tried to hide my past, and I did for a very long time up until this book came out. Nobody really knew that I'd went through it. I had to create a whole new person. I had to be somebody completely different. I had to move to get away from the environment that I was in. And that was what allowed me to do that. So the guilt that comes along with that, and just feeling the shame of being in there, and you don't really want to talk about it because you're already feeling judged when you get out, and you feel inferior. Anybody with authority, bosses, whatever, there's a level of distrust there too, because of what they've been through in the system as kids. We were taught that, most of the people that were in that position were taking advantage, of everybody. And so we had this huge distrust for anybody in the authority position. And so I struggled with bosses. I struggled with people in a leadership role trying to, tell me what to do, because I always felt like there was some type of agenda, or that they were after me, or, and then with that guilt, that internal guilt too, I took everything to heart and didn't feel good enough. And so that was a huge obstacle for me to get past. And it took years to get there.
But you, one thing that's admirable and inspiring is, even though it took you all of those years and you had to process it, I mean, you showed up. Like you said, when you finally made that choice, you said, I'm meant to do bigger things. I want a better life. I'm going to make some changes.
Yeah.
And you had an opportunity. I think you told me that's when you started working in the oil field.
Yes.
And that was where the journey really began.
Yeah, that was for me starting, I moved back to Wyoming, so, after I got out, and that was how I was able to, redefine who I was. I could hide from my past and nobody would know really what I went through, because I was a different person. I was a new person now. And so I could be whoever I wanted to be. And, of course, with my whole family being in the oil and gas, and, my dad, mom, brothers, everybody that, was in my immediate family, we were all oil filled. And so that was the life I knew that I'd grown up with as a kid, and helped my dad, running routes with him as, when I was real young. So I had connections in that space that I was able to utilize and get a job. And from there, I just kind of grew. I knew what I wanted to do, and I figured the oil field was going to be my home. It was where I was going to be forever. And so I wanted to learn as fast as I could, and wanted to take the hard jobs, and started off rouseabouting, understanding, the new wells. And then Halliburton to me was somebody that I looked at, a company that had a lot of pride at the time. And we're talking 1998, and 1999, where, the guys from Halliburton would walk into a restaurant, and they were all in their Halliburton coveralls. And it was very intriguing to me. And everybody said, man, it's a hard job. Fracking's tough. It's dangerous. It's scary. And a lot of the guys on the crew were so much older than I was. And I wanted that. I was like, okay, well, if it's that hard, then give it to me. Let's go for it. And so I hired on with Halliburton, got my CDL, and most of the guys that I worked with on that crew, they were old school. They didn't want to change. Somebody wanted to run a blender and they wanted to stay on the blender. The iron boss wanted to stay on the iron. And so that allowed me to work with these guys and learn everything from top to bottom on how that frack was ran. And I loved it. And I stayed with Halliburton for several years up there. So yeah, it was a good time.
Did that help a lot with being able to redefine who you were, like that physical work and being with
Yeah.
those guys? Like, I know what you mean, like the infamous red jumpsuits. Like, that's Halliburton, and
Yeah.
Halliburton's so recognizable. And so I
Sure.
could see, especially from where you'd been,
Right.
and you wanted to carve out your own identity.
Sure.
And, so being able to kind of look at them and look up to them and then be working alongside them, that seems like that would help you stay, kind of have some solid footing.
Well, it gave me structure too. So I had to be accountable for everything that I did, and I had those guys that looked after me. They were amazing. I knew where I needed to be every day, knew what I was doing every day, and so that helped because with being in the system as a juvenile, we had that same kind of structure, right? We had everything from waking up to going to bed, and with Halliburton, it did create that. It gave me a level of structure that I needed in my life, and the responsibility, and I was making decent money. I, quit going to college because Halliburton took so much time, and I was dedicated to that. I loved what I was doing, and yeah, it felt like home. Yeah, very much so. So
I could see that, and I could see that like being like a rehabilitated environment that was similar to what you knew, but
yeah,
had the benefits. Like you were
right,
learning, you were working, you were making your own money, and being independent. So I know
yeah,
that I've talked to a lot of individuals, even just on my podcast, about transitioning from the military
sure,
into the oil field, and I've had some conversations about convicted felons and how they were able to not just find a new path, but like find some of your people too.
yeah,
Because I mean, like everyone that goes to the oil field is different, but
sure,
I mean, you could definitely find your people that may have a rough past, or
right,
they're starting over, or like some of it's the end of the road. It's either this or back to prison, or
right,
it's like you can go to the oil field for so many reasons. It's like you can be short on options and you got to do it,
right.
or you want a clean start and you can create something that's your own.
Yeah, that was huge for me, right? Especially with the guys that I was working with on that particular crew. They all came from a rough past. There wasn't a single guy on there that I think that breezed through life, right? They were all had a struggle at some point, and I fit in well with those guys because we had some similarities there, and where there was some hardships and struggles, and maybe they didn't make the right choices, as they were growing up and getting into those positions. But they were also seasoned and they were hardened, and and there was no BS, right? It was you come here, you work, and you put in every bit of effort that they're doing, and so I learned that discipline from those guys, and there was no excuses. Zero. They didn't tolerate that. And back then, that's kind of how the oil field was. You had to put in, and they weren't going to be lenient with you. And especially those guys, man, they were tough. And I thrived in it. I did well, and it helped me tremendously. Move past feeling that shame and that guilt and feeling like I didn't belong, and I could be myself and make the right decisions and still be grounded with a crew that was gonna help with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they were excellent. I didn't feel out of place in the oil field. I think allows a lot of different people to come into it and just be who they are. And but you don't tolerate a lot either. You have to really, show up.
Yeah.
And it still has that mentality.
I can relate to that in some ways, because even though like my experience was different, I mean, I was a female working in the field,
Yeah.
and I can tell like how much that my experiences have hardened me a bit, enough to where like I'm tough enough that I
Sure.
can stand on my own and I can take care of myself. But it's like sometimes like I'll be talking to people that have clearly had a softer
Right.
path in life, and I don't connect with them
Right.
as much as I connect with people that have really put in those hard days on location, like those
Absolutely.
endless days on location.
Yeah.
And just really like you're in your mind and you're just having to figure it out, and you're stuck in a way, because
Right.
I mean, you need the job, you need the work, like this is what's available to you, and if you're short on options, or that's what you have in front of you, you learn to adapt. But I think that the camaraderie and being in it together,
Right.
and it's like it's an experience that you You know, if you know, you know. Like if
Right.
you've only if you've done it. And I can imagine, especially at that time, because the oil field has gotten softer throughout the years.
Oh yeah, big
I
time.
mean, completely. Like even
Yeah.
just from when I was in the field, I'm like, you guys don't even know.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine, decades prior, like
Yeah.
what things are like. And I mean, it can be a really tough group, and there's still
Sure.
tough people in the oil field, but there's just a lot with
Yeah.
technology, innovation, and just with the
Right.
different amenities that we now have. Like there's a lot more, wiggle room there to not have to be so hardened.
Yeah, it's evolving fast. We see it every day, right? Everything is, becoming more automated, less manpower needed to do, the big jobs. It is changing, and you have to learn to evolve with that. You have to learn to grow. Every day you have to learn something and understand that it's coming. You know, a long time ago, you had a lot of the old timers that just they didn't want to. They weren't going to adjust. They weren't going to change, and
Yeah.
those guys retired out pretty quick, and it's changed. The workforce is definitely changing. A lot of these guys that are coming in now from the different colleges, they've got a different mindset, different thoughts and ideas on how they want to change. Also with the different shell booms and the way that we drill and frack wells have invited a ton of different technological advances and different brains and thoughts behind all that, to where it's getting very creative, and it's evolving fast. So from what the oil field is today compared to 20 years ago, it is night and day difference, night and day. And a lot of the newer guys that have been in it, 10 less than 10 years, they don't know what it was like, prior to all this. And you still have a lot of guys like myself and people that have been in it for a long time that are still kind of seasoned and hardened, and change is tough. It's hard to adapt to, and yeah, it's different world.
It's so different. And, when I started my podcast, like a lot of it was, gosh, all these experiences I've
Yeah.
had, what I've seen, what I've gone through. And so there's so many different pillars to like what Power the Permian is, but
Right.
a lot of it is about looking at the future and how we navigate careers moving forward with all of the innovation and technology and the rapid evolution with AI and all the changes, but also preserving some of the stories and the culture and those experiences, because I'm grateful for where we are. I love the efficiency of it, of how we can communicate and do business. There's a lot more flexibility where there's a little bit of that work-life balance or opportunity to pursue other things. But it's also like when we look back on the way the oil field was, like there's still something like very much preserved about the culture of how hard it's been to get to where we are, to value those difficult days and not take for granted like how far we've come,
Right.
and being able to apply a lot of that wisdom and the experiences that people that are still in the industry,
Sure.
that have the knowledge of how to operate without technology, because those life skills, like they're still just as valuable today. They may not be as applicable, they may not be as necessary, because when I look back on some of my survival days in the field and how difficult it would be just to get to and from location, just depending on where everything is located,
Yeah.
with limited communication, limited resources. And now we're just so instant. Everything is instant, not just instant, it's live. Like,
Right.
I mean, you can communicate so efficiently and effectively, but I think sometimes we miss that mark because there's so many broken links from the way things were to, well, this is the way it's being done now.
Yeah.
And so it's like you get a little bit of that friction between people. You can tell who's been in it
Yeah.
a long time and who's come in it, like, in more recent
A little
years.
fresh. Yeah. Yeah. Back then we didn't have pin drops. We had to read a map. Somebody, 1.2 miles west, turn, east. And yeah, it was such a different environment and animal back in those days. And I don't necessarily say I miss them.
I don't.
There's a ton of sacrifices.
Right.
And that was one of the things that, people were aware of back then. And, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, even in the early 2000s, the difference now in technology and the way people are doing things are so much different. Families truly had to sacrifice, and there's still a lot of sacrifice today, but it seems like people are able to travel a little bit more. They don't have to be right there, in the Permian Basin all the time. So they can travel. Families, of course, back then, when I was working frac, we were gone for days and days at a time, weeks. I remember being gone for almost a month and not getting to come back home. So the sacrifices back then, I feel like were a lot worse than what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the families were a little bit harder back then too. The kids understood Dad wasn't coming home. He wasn't going to make all the baseball games. He wasn't going to be there for some of the Christmases, and the wives understood that too. And they signed up for that life, and, some made it and some didn't,
Mm-hmm.
And now, you talk about it getting a little bit softer. I don't feel like, people could adapt to that easily as they could back then. The divorce rates are crazy, and it's just, people don't want that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's changed. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, it's like what we didn't know. Because I mean, I can
Right.
remember like, growing up and we would travel to a pipeline job and there were no cell phones. Like
Oh,
my stepdad had a CB radio in his truck and he used it sometimes, and it's like, that's where I think a lot of them got like some of their nicknames and their handles, it's like they talked to, truckers on the highway, like, if a gas station was coming up, the truck stop was coming up, like what the weather is like there weren't any resources to even have any idea of like what was ahead of you. Like I learned how to read a Rand McAnally road atlas. Like I could read everything on it, and we would go by that. And then there would like a little bit of technology would come out, like there even before like the actual Garmin GPS, like we had something that would tell you how soon like the next restaurant or the next truck stop, things like that. Like I don't remember exactly how that worked, but I remember using that, and it was like it was somewhat effective. I mean, it was like just you could see the evolution of technology. I remember when he got his first cell phone. It was the Motorola bag phone. It was $5 a minute, and it was and the numbers are on the outside, and it's like you have to plug it in, and I mean it just weighed 20 pounds. But that was like probably maybe 95, 96.
Yeah.
And so where we are now, and even when I worked in the field, I can remember that, like getting to the location in Orla, it was nerve-wracking because I'm not great with direction anyway. And then it's like, you're having to pass 3 cattle guards and you go down and there's a small bridge and then the location's down on the right.
Yeah.
And they all look the same,
Right.
And so you're looking for your landmarks, to where now we have all of this knowledge of what we can do.
Right.
And there's a little bit of back and forth because it's like technology is taking over, but technology is also allowing us to live better.
Right.
It's like we didn't know back then how we could have it, because that was, we were as current as we could be with technology, and it was very limited as far as just travel, just traveling to a location. And then like think about like being on location, being on the right of way, being, on a rig, and you can't call your wife and tell her you're going to be late because there's no cell phone.
Sure.
You're just like, well, I guess he's okay. It's like you don't even know, and that you didn't know any better. And so sometimes I guess ignorance is bliss, but I agree with you. I don't think we could go back.
No, it was, I remember, 9/11. We learned about 9/11 listening to the radio in the frag van on location. We thought the world was ending. We had no idea, and we couldn't go anywhere, so we had the little, I think, little Nokia cell phones or something back then, but everybody was always on roaming, and most of the time when you're out there, you couldn't get service anyway.
Right.
So yeah, we sat there and listened to the old 9/11 on a radio in the frag van, and we thought we were in war, and we didn't get to see it until we got back to the hotel that night. So yeah, it's changed quite a bit, and thankfully so. It definitely has made life a hell of a lot easier, and it's great now. So,
and I think it's what you make it. It's like what I've been able to do. Like I wouldn't have been able to create any of this, 5 or 10 years ago. Like the technology didn't exist, not to how it is now.
Yeah.
Like and how we can connect and know people and learn about the industry and navigate careers.
Right.
So for me, it's like that's one thing that I've noticed is like how much it's evolved, and now, like you said, how quickly it's evolving now.
It's
So
going
I think it's
fast.
important to have conversations and just, one, offering a little bit of guidance for the younger generation coming up and people that are in the industry right now, and, making decisions based off of what's like how the job market's changing,
Yeah.
and how there's new opportunities that evolve every day because of all of these changes, and being
Sure.
willing to adapt. So I think that was the biggest takeaway, like from what you were telling me about your book and where you are now in your career, is your
Yeah.
willingness to adapt.
Yeah, you have to. It's, what do they say? Adapt or die. I mean, that's where we're at right now. And every day something new is coming into the industry or being introduced, and people have the different ideas. You go back into, like the water side of things, when that first broke loose, people were wanting to reuse, produced water for frac jobs. And that took on a whole new life of its own, something that wasn't even a thought process in the oil and gas. And to watch that evolve and change over the last few years have been pretty incredible, with the amount of new companies that have started up and companies that have branched off from others, and then to where it's at today. And for us, we're pushing on the automation side, the new technology as well. And every day we got engineers in the office that are working to try to keep up with that side of it, and create a new business line for us, and create the way, something new that a company can do, flow back or whatever, right? So it's changing all the time. People are definitely getting creative and trying to have this entrepreneurial type mindset, where they're looking for holes to fill, and they're doing a good job of it.
I think so too, and then of course, like coming out of the pandemic, like we've restructured a lot of the
Yeah,
way that we do work, and it's a lot of it's not changed back, because
yeah,
it's nice to be able to, have meetings and you're not having to be there. And I
for
mean,
sure.
if you're in oil and gas, you're going to travel to at least a little bit.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's nothing like it used to be, as far as like meetings and networking, and being able to just be known, and build your client base
right.
or your network. But
Yeah.
you like, because now you're in a sales role.
Yes.
How
Yeah.
did you go from the field into sales?
So that happened years ago. I was working for Weatherford Fracturing Technologies. And truthfully, it's kind of a weird story. I know we kind of touched base on it a little bit, but in 2007, Weatherford was making a change. They were moving their yard from Odessa to Hobbs, and back then nobody really wanted to live in Hobbs. I don't know of any. I won't say that too much, but we didn't. I didn't want to live in Hobbs. Most of the guys didn't either, and I had an opportunity where I was approached to do sales for a supply company. And I think that all started, and I think I told you the story where I rode the lawnmower across the state of Texas,
Yes,
right?
your
And so
infamous lawnmower
the
story.
lawnmower deal was, happened February 2007. We had raised some money for St. Jude's Ranch for Children, but I literally rode a lawnmower from Wascom all the way to Midland, and we ended up at the oil museum there in town, sponsored by, a ton of different oil and gas companies. And so they all showed up, and it really started as a joke. I didn't take it serious until the owner of the, radio station called and said, "Hey, we got a lawnmower, and we got this, we've got the route set up, and, we have everybody on board." And that's when I knew I messed up. So I had to go through with it. And Weatherford, thankfully, when I talked to my boss, he said, "Well, we're gonna do this. So we'll pay you for the next 2 weeks if you complete it. If you don't, you don't get anything." And he said, "If you do complete it, we'll even donate some money for it." So thankfully, we completed it. But as soon after that happened, I made a bunch of different connections, and one of the guys approached me and said, "Hey, would you ever think about doing sales? You have the chemistry for it. We think you'd be great at it. We'll train you and, show you how to get into that." So I did it. Weatherford had moved, and I'd left Weatherford and went to work for the supply company, and started learning the sales ropes and how to build, customers and clients. And, that was kind of my intro into the sales aspect of it. And I did really, really well with it. But I had the opportunity to move to the Barnett Shell. And so they transferred me up there. And when I was up there, I had a call from a friend of mine that I'd worked with for years in the frac side of things. And he was overseeing a lot of the completions for Quicksilver. And so he had wanted me to come on board with them and start overseeing some of their frac jobs. And it was such a different frac type too. So they were doing all slick water jobs. You would sit out on location and, uh, you'd be there for 3 months on one pad. And I wasn't accustomed to that. It was such a different animal than what I was familiar with, but I learned it and stayed in operations for years and had the opportunity to come over to Enercorp, about 5 years ago and be on the sales side of it. And, man, it's been great. I've loved it. I love doing sales. It kind of gives you that freedom to, set your own schedule, talk to who you want to talk to, and, really push. And, they give you that opportunity to be as best as you can, really. So
Yeah.
I fell in love with doing sales.
That's awesome. Well, one more congratulations in order for today is that you were awarded a Sales Hunter of the Year at Enercorp.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That came as a surprise for the last several years. So each year we have like a sales summit, and everybody was getting these awards, and I was like, man, I'm getting it next year. I'm getting it, and it makes you want to pursue it even harder and challenge yourself. And I got really lucky, this past year with some really great customers being able to open up new accounts and get some new businesses established and running as current customers. And so I did really, really well with those guys, and I ended up getting my first award. Yeah.
That's so
So
exciting.
it was great. Yeah.
Well, that was what was funny because I remember that caught my eye. I saw that on LinkedIn, and I just remember thinking, oh, good for him.
Yeah.
Because I'm always like, whenever I share things on my business page or I'm just looking at what's going on, like, I love seeing like success stories from people, and I'd seen that. And then a few weeks later, I saw that you had an article in the Star Telegram, and it caught my eye because I saw the name, but it wasn't until I got an email, and we've got to thank Randy Maxwell for making this introduction, who just reached out and said that I had to have you on my show, and you had a great story, and he thought you would do really well.
Yeah, I haven't talked to that guy in years, which is funny. I still need to reach back out and tell him, hey, check this out. So, I got the Salesman of the Year award back in October, and that was, to me, Intercorp's they've been extremely awesome for me. It's been by far one of the best companies I've ever worked for. They've allowed me to kind of grow within the organization. They allow me to have that time that I need and to really push myself. They give everybody that opportunity, and it's been phenomenal ever since. So they have a great culture that I fit right into, and everybody really seems to try to help each other out, and it's really like a family, a great team environment, and it makes people want to do better. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so inspiring too. Just finding the right team, the right people, the right environment, and you can excel. But it's something that I've learned over the years too, that if you're in the wrong environment, it doesn't matter how hard you work. That can just be, completely like just working against you. And then, you kind of get in your head about it. But, another great thing about working in sales and working with Enercorp and really just like your whole unique story, you've been able to pursue some other endeavors, and you've had some interesting opportunities.
Yeah. So even with them, it's just kind of weird how things evolve and change. I was did get in on the film side, acting. Got the opportunity to play on the Lioness with Zoe Saldana. I got to, be in a scene with her and got the credit for that. Met Nicole Kidman, and we just recently came out with a film this year that was actually filmed in Midland called Stand the Man. And so, that came as a surprise, and, it's something that I never expected to go anywhere, but it has, and it's evolved, and just kind of riding, seeing where it goes. But, my priority, of course, will always be the oil field. And this is just something additional to kind of see where this eventually takes me. And I've always, wanted to pursue things outside of this and just see where I can push myself. And I've got certain goals that I just want to continue to keep, checking off. Writing the book was one. I actually wrote that book 15 years ago. And it was much longer than what it is right now, but it was kind of something that I'd talked with my mom about, many years ago. And so she passed away several years ago, and I just thought to myself a couple months ago, like, man, I need to, just go forward with it, finish it, see what happens, and just let the universe take over from there. And it's done exceptionally well. The acting side of it really came as just, an accident. Started many years ago, but it just really picked up, by trying to get my kids involved, because my daughter was wanting to do, theater. And so I found something for her to explore what that looked like. And just by being there, I was picked up, and though it's kind of evolved into, doing the Lioness and, having conversations with like Beth Sepko and my agent about doing, a different series on the Landman. And so we're going to see where that ends up. It's been incredible so far. Did an Apple commercial, and I never in a million years thought this is where I'd end up.
Right.
My whole life has been oil filled. I've been in it for 27 years now, since 1998, and that's where I thought my life would always be, and more than likely always will be, but with some caveats and additional things under my belt, which has been kind of incredible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. I mean, just an incredible story. It does sound very, very full circle, and a lot like things are just getting started for you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I'm not going to take my foot off the gas.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like very much a balance, like a good
Sure.
mindset. Obviously, that's something that's needed, and
Right.
willing to put in the work and the effort, but also like thinking outside the box a little bit. Like,
Oh, yeah.
because you said like, some of the skills that you developed early in life that's helped
Sure.
you in sales and being adaptable, and, getting these opportunities to act and pursue your passions that are really just kind of starting to come to life.
Right. I think we all have to grow, right? We all have to try to push, our limits every day, and look for other things that we really want to, try to do, right? We all have dreams of doing something. And if you're not actively trying to hit that goal every day, then, you're just going to kind of drown out. You're going to wake up in 15 years and say, I wish I would have done that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to be there. I want to know that whenever I wake up 15 years from now, I gave it my all and I tried everything I could. And whether that's acting, oil field, or writing a book, whatever it is, riding a lawnmower across the state of Texas, like, I'm going to try it.
You're so open to
Yeah,
all kinds of experiences.
I'm just going to see where it goes.
Yeah.
I love a challenge, and, I love, being open to different opportunities when they come up. It's, you got to explore and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story. Your book, Behind Closed Eyes, is available on Amazon.
On Amazon, yeah. Right now it's on Amazon, yeah.
Great. Well, I've enjoyed reading it and hearing your story. I feel very inspired, and I appreciate you coming on and everything that you've shared about the industry and your experience in it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to share it. It's been great. It's a great platform, and yeah, I love the opportunity. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, JD.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for watching Power of the Permian. We'll see you next time.